well, you've got two elements to this problem. One has a libertarian solution, one has an anti-libertarian solution. Okay, you don't care about principles, that's fine. I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying if you don't care about principles, that's fine. Let's look at it pragmatically. You've got one that's a solution for only itself and one that's a solution for both things. So it's like, okay, well, pragmatically, then we should be going for the libertarian option. And then as a final kind of also somewhat pragmatic point, by staying pure to our principles, we're keeping our overall movement stronger. Whereas by violating that principle in this one area, even if we think it's for the greater good, which I think I've made the point that I dispute that claim, but even if we think that it is, what about the knock-on effect, the detriment it has to our overall movement by that the hypocrisy destroys ourselves. It destroys our own credibility. And all of the people that we're trying to bring into this by saying, well, look, because one of the big selling points I personally have with libertarian is I don't focus on the right or the left. I say, look, this is for everybody who just wants to be free. If it doesn't matter what your preference is. It doesn't matter if you want collectives and communes or whether you want free market capitalism. As long as you understand the freedom aspect, we can all live in peace together, even if we're not directly connected. We can still tolerate each other's existence at absolute worst, and my problem is once we violate one principle, so, well, if you're going to violate that, why not violate this, and then why not violate that, and then before you know it, we're back in this great big mess. And then obviously there is also the economic aspect, because as some people have pointed out, and I'm not the first person to make this argument, enforcing the border is very expensive, and it's just more money that you're giving to the government to pay for people to enforce, to process people and all the rest of it. Whereas if we reform the welfare state, that's going to involve reducing costs to the taxpayers because you're reducing the welfare state, you know what I mean? And whatever extra administration might be involved in that process is going to be, a fraction of a percentage of what you're going to be cutting out of the overall expenditure, you know what I mean? So it's like economically, it doesn't make sense for libertarians to support closed borders. Principally, it certainly doesn't make sense. And also, I would argue pragmatically, even though on the surface it might seem to be the pragmatic choice, I think if we think about it a bit more deeper and look at the consequences and look at the fact that both are equally hard to achieve. Like people say, oh, you're dreaming if you think we're going to reform the welfare state. I just tend to say, well, you're dreaming if you think we're going to reform the borders as well. It's like they're both ambitious, but if we're going to put our energy and our focus into something, then surely it makes sense to put our focus on the more effective solution that doesn't compromise our principles, that's more economically viable. Like it ticks all the boxes for me. Some of those boxes aren't obvious. The principal one is more obvious than, say, the utilitarian one, the pragmatic one. But for me, once it's explored and scrutinized, I think it does tick all of the boxes. But yeah, I mean, you summed it up really well anyway. So
there are no chinks in your armor. Your reasoning is very sound. It's nice one there bringing in the economic argument, because you've won my heart with that. In addition to the other things you said, I have no response. I have no question. I mean, I'll go back and think about. You have no idea how exciting this is for me. I almost didn't take this meeting because of the illness I told you about. Right, but I'm very, very glad I did. It's very, very enlightening. I have a lot to think. I can't stop smiling. Knowledge makes me. Knowledge is. I like to know stuff, right? So this is very, very good for me. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy for me to accept that that position is wrong, because I've pretty much held it. I mean, I just argued passionately for it like 10 minutes ago, and so it's. Thank you for this. This is good. I'll think about it. I'll talk to a couple of people about it. I'll try the argument on some of my friends who see things the same way, and let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. But thank you very much for this. I have nothing to say in response. Maybe that's just because I'm stupid, but
no, it's not. And I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I'd like to, and I'm not just saying this to return the compliment, but I really appreciate the fact that you have this attitude, because the thing is, and it's the same for me. I might be wrong, and I look forward to you coming back with other arguments to see where I've missed
Yeah.
something, because that's the thing. It's like, before I obviously laid those arguments out, you had your arguments and they were sound. I understood them because I've obviously heard them before and that. But the fact of the matter is I was still listening. I mean, you made the arguments probably as well as I've ever heard them made, but they were the arguments that I was kind of ready for because I've heard them before. So it was kind of easy for me to kind of come back with it and that. But the point is the fact that and I'll give a little shout out to Stefan Kinsella, who I'm hoping that you'll speak to eventually as well, he's one of those rare people who's a very well-known intellectual, who's very respected by the kind of, well-known intellectuals, but he's also not an elitist. He's not arrogant, and he will listen. And I had a similar conversation with him about this, where he actually was prepared to listen to my arguments, even though at first he disagreed with it, but he was prepared to listen to the arguments with open to the possibility that there was something to consider, and that's what I appreciate from you. And that's something that I want to try to be myself. I don't want to be thinking I know it all, and I want to be open to be challenged. And that's one of the reasons why I love these conversations, because I think these things are right, but I'm not God, and my own understanding has evolved and refined as I've gone through conversations like this and considering the principles. And I think that this is, if we're going to win, and let's face it, we're underdogs in the fight for freedom. The world is government, the world is statist. But if we're going to win, it's through things like this that we're going to win, because it's through getting this extra refinement and extra understanding. Like a lot of people, I think, conversations like this, it's about leaving our egos at the door and just scrutinizing our arguments. I mean, one of the things, sorry, I'm going all over the place, but one of the things I consider conversations like this to be, it's like collective thinking. Like, I've only got one brain. Like, if you've got a computer and you connect it to another computer for the extra CPU and the extra thinking power, if you like, that's how I view conversations. Like, me and you, it's like we're connecting our CPUs so that we can have together, we've got greater thinking power than we have alone. You know what I mean? Like, the arguments that I can present to myself are limited to what my own brain is thinking of, and and all the rest of it. Whereas another person can come at things with angles and perspectives and point of views that I hadn't considered, and vice versa. And I think if we all do this more together, I think we'll polish and refine our understanding of this. And I think this will become a stronger movement, because I think, like, a lot of people say that it's libertarians' rigidness or our refusal to compromise on principles that is our problem. I don't think that's our problem. I think our problem is we compromise too much. And I think our problem is that we don't spend enough time like smoothing out the rough edges. Because the problem is when people get confronted with these ideas, if they're getting conflicting descriptions of what it even means, they're like, well, they can't even agree between themselves. But if that disagreement is part of an ongoing conversation that they can participate in, and understandings are getting refined along the way, then I actually think that not only do we become stronger as a movement, but I think we become more appealing to other people because it seems more coherent. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's a long-winded way of saying thank you for having this conversation with such an open mind. So
thank you for helping open my mind. I usually tell people on Twitter, the people I debate against, I always tell them I'm very open to being wrong. I don't mind being wrong. It sucks, don't get me wrong, it sucks to be wrong. It just means you didn't think things out properly, or you didn't do your homework properly, you didn't have all the information, but at the end of the day, I'm better off when